I was going to say 8 a.m. on my side, but okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this edition of Bincang ASEAN. And the theme of today's webinar is Path to Youth Empowerment, Activism, Education, and Mobility. So this event is hosted by the ASEAN Studies Centre at the Universitas Gadjah Mada in Indonesia. So I'll just provide some background on this event and then on our speakers. So I'll introduce both of our speakers for today, and then we can move on to some of our guiding questions. So Bincang ASEAN is an online webinar series hosted by, as I said, the ASEAN Studies Centre. And this acts as a platform for sharing and open discussion about ASEAN-related issues. This month's upcoming Bincang ASEAN's theme, as I said, is Path to Youth Empowerment, and consistent with AYIEP, the ASEAN Studies Centre's short course promotes youth empowerment in ASEAN, and our webinar today will discuss and showcase the diversity of ways that ASEAN youth can become proactive in their communities and in the direction of their own lives. Guest speakers from various organizations, as I said, will discuss different forms of empowerment, such as youth activism, advocacy, youth mobility, and educational opportunities within ASEAN. Currently, young people are playing a growing role in the ASEAN community and the common ASEAN identity. For example, over the last year, student-led protests have taken center stage in ASEAN's most salient political events. However, there are many other ways to foster youth involvement other than activism, all of which are important. All forms of youth empowerment encourage young people to take action in their lives and in their local, regional, or national communities in order to solve problems and ensure a better future for themselves and others. This is immensely important, not only for the health of a generation, but also for ensuring a healthy future of the ASEAN region. So youth empowerment can increase a sense of youth efficacy in the population, as well as the relationship between young people and ASEAN as an organization. Another key component of the potential for youth empowerment is opportunity and mobility, including key opportunities like educational access and guidance from youth organizations. So I can move on to an introduction of our speakers for today and just some background. So first of all, Ili Nadia Zulfaka is a co-founder of the climate justice group Climat Action Malaysia, and she is currently doing policy research on the nexus of water, energy, and food at the Institute of Strategic and International Studies Malaysia. Formerly, she was an advisor for the Environment for Peace program at the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. So we are very glad to have you here today with us, Nadia. Hello.
Oh, hello. Hi. I'm so glad to be given this opportunity to speak to everyone. I couldn't see everyone, but it's all good. Shall I do my sharing right now, or?
I'll just introduce Calvin, and then maybe I can move on to the questions for the both of you.
All right.
So then, Mr. Calvin Wee, for him, is co-founder of the Young Seekers, which is an NGO that brings together young people in Southeast Asia who are passionate about advancing the ASEAN-China region. And this is the first NGO and the only NGO in Southeast Asia with a China and ASEAN angle. It currently has operations in 8 ASEAN countries and China. Mr. Wee has studied at the National University of Singapore in US, Fudan and Peking University, and recently he represented Singapore in the Young ASEAN Leaders Policy Initiative of 2020 at Chulalongkorn University in Thailand. He was a delegate for the STEP Youth Regional Affairs Dialogue this year, organized by the Temasek Foundation, and he is a proud delegate for the Singapore-Indonesia Youth Leaders Exchange Program. Hi, Calvin. We're very glad to have you with us today.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So I think we can move on to some general guiding questions for our webinar today. I think I'll turn to Nadia first. So my first question for you is, is the youth activism we've witnessed in recent times across Southeast Asia focused purely on country-specific issues, or are there some overlaps between the issues being fought for, which could help forge an ASEAN identity?
Yes, obviously, I think it's really good that you mentioned that Asia, I think ASEAN itself is a very diverse community. We have people coming from different ethnicity, speaking different languages. Even we were colonized by different people at certain stages. So obviously the kind of the kind of geography, socio-geographic, I would say the melting pot that we are seeing in at Southeast Asia is quite diverse, and I think the kind of activism that we've been seeing in this region, maybe pre-COVID, I would say there's a pre-COVID, during COVID. Pre-COVID was quite different. There was a rise of some sort of like a progressive young people in different parts of ASEAN, getting hold of the parliament and getting stronger political voices, political influence. And somehow during the pandemic, and everything was, it was like opening the Pandora's box. Everything was let loose. The pandemic has definitely change the way how ASEAN, how the future of ASEAN looks. Definitely on the certain regions, certain countries like Myanmar, where we see the rise of right extremism, military expansion. The same goes in the Philippines. And the same in Indonesia. I would say there was a lot of protests and strikes that we've seen for the last few months since last year. So I think it's really good that we've acknowledged that different countries are responding to this different situations differently. But I think it's the youth. What I can say is that the youth are very much present in all of this uprising. That is good to know that the youth are all right, the kids are all right. The voices are getting stronger, even though it's being diminished in certain ways. Being taken their democracy, their democratic rights, ability to speak. Some are being silenced, some are even being killed in what we've been seeing in Myanmar the last few months. Is it okay if I share a little bit about what my
Absolutely.
organization did when it comes
Absolutely.
to climate crisis? Yeah. Okay. So I hope everyone can sort of see the screen right now. Is it sharing? All good?
Oh yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It's
Okay.
fair enough.
Awesome. So I'll just share this very briefly. I'll go through this. So my organization works primarily in trying to mobilize the people of Malaysia to pressure the Malaysian government to declare a climate emergency. As we know, this region, not only Malaysia, this region in Southeast Asia region, we one of the worst hit region when it comes to socioeconomic, after the small nation state islands, partly because we are one of the, I would say, one of the poorest region in the world, as well as having different capacity to adapt to the warming climate. So we are basically, we were born somewhere in 2019. We did we primarily just went on the streets to do climate strikes, and this we were one of the few, we were actually the first group that organized such strikes before, and larger ones, obviously. It was literally, the people were really angry at the way how governments, how corporations, and the negotiations that has been stalling at UNFCCC about how to actively and urgently address the climate crisis that we are facing right now. And I know in Indonesia as well, there's been massive situations, crisis that's been going on when it comes to water scarcity, and these are and water scarcity, and at the same time you would see flooding. So these extreme weather events are occurring often, more often than not. And we have our neighboring country in the Philippines facing typhoons, getting stronger and stronger typhoons. So it's really the movement in Malaysia came out because we think that not enough action is being taken. Everyone is doing lip service, and we were pretty much an angry bunch of youth. And so now we also, in the midst of the pandemic, we think that we have to pivot in a more towards advocacy, and we do a lot of coalition building. So these are the organizations and the coalitions that we are facilitating, we help build, because we do realize that we cannot be the only one pursuing this. We can't reinvent the wheel. So the best thing is to get different people with different expertise, different opinions, or the diversity of people to work together, and figure out a way how each of us can contribute in an effective manner, because this climate calamity is already here and it's going to get worse in the next 10 years. We don't have time. So coalition building is absolutely critical, I would say, right now when it comes to building climate resilience in Southeast Asia. And at the same time, we run a lot of activities, and this is one of them. Weaving Hopes for the Future, where we work with indigenous youth and women, based on 4 different pillars: creative art, education, empowerment, and activism. So this is a collaboration between Malaysia and UK, and we hope to display the work of the indigenous youth and women in COP26 in Glasgow by the end of the year. So this project is really important because we want to create that space where indigenous youth can come in and speak for themselves, instead of us, youth coming from urban areas to, take up spaces that was reserved for them. So Malaysia is quite different in a way that we do not have where indigenous voices are silenced or ignored in decision-making spaces. For example, from previous activities or webinars or workshops that I've been with indigenous activists in the Philippines or in Indonesia, they are very vocal. Like there's tons of literature that they have sent to UN bodies, or appeals that they've did, but it's different in Malaysia. So we are totally relying on our neighboring partners, partners from different neighboring countries to help us on this. So we were really lucky that those kind of help was being offered to us. So we think that this is where it should start, by building voices, by building capacity of vulnerable voices to act on climate. Yeah. So this is primarily some of the things that we do when we work with them. We collect climate information and apply gender mainstreaming, mostly from the lens of women and youth, because different people experiences climate differently, so impacts are felt disproportionately. And indigenous knowledge, there's a lot of things that we can learn from our indigenous people, and they are as strong as scientific knowledge, I would say. Their philosophies of life, I think it should not be taken aside, especially in COP, UNFCCC COP negotiations. Their voices should be strong, and this year it will be strong. I'm so glad that we are participating in that from the indigenous perspective. Right. And another thing that I think a lot of youth in Asia that is also doing podcasts, we also do this. We had this thing called Perempuan Dalam Kepanasan, or Women in Heat. This is the first climate podcast in Malaysia. So I'm really amazed and proud at how the youth, are taking that stand, breaking that wall, and going in with such conviction that we have to hold the space. We have to reclaim the space that was meant for us. Yeah, if you guys have time to have a listen to the podcast, it's amazing. And as I did say, we do a lot of capacity building, different communities, and that means when you're facing different communities, the way that you should act, the information that you disseminate has to be different. And youth are really, I think, as a sector, youth is an easy group to work with, partly because they are tech savvy. They are not that resilient to new technologies, obviously. um, you know um, Finding information in places where normally we wouldn't think about, and the way that they use the plethora of social media, is amazing. So I think we wouldn't be there if part of us are not youth. And I think it would be really important that I say this. The kind of action that we must see can't happen only from the youth. So the problem, the calamity that we are facing, we cannot pass it to the next generation to solve it. So it's important for us to engage with youth, but it's also important for us to engage with older, bigger organizations, because they need to pass on that information to us to ensure that sustainable, ensuring that pass of knowledge. Because we know that obviously this is not a sprint, this is a marathon. This trying to solve climate crisis is not something as easy that you can do in a few years time. This has been going on for decades, and we have to expedite and move with such urgency in order to survive. So we are talking about the surviving this um, crisis, and now with the pandemic is just a double whammy. And imagine, like, how are we going to be able to to protect ourselves in a situation where all these different extreme weather extremes are happening, and we are not able to, partly because we didn't came up with a strong recovery phase for our countries after the pandemic. So it's quite a troubling phase right now. So these are some of the actions that we do. Different workshops and different communities. This is official folk community, indigenous, as well as we also did workshops on the transboundary haze. Yeah, so that was an eye opener. Yeah, I think these are. I don't think that I have to explain this. These are some of the things that we did during the pandemic, where we mobilize and centralize our resources, and most of it were our youth groups, to bring out COVID-19 aids to different indigenous communities in Peninsular Malaysia. It was a massive effort, and was totally unprecedented. And the way how youth mobilize in such a crisis, it was an indicator that we we will do good. We will achieve something if we work together. So that is a main point. So yeah, and these are our memorandums that we send to every time when we have strikes. These are the steps that we think the government should take in order to address the climate crisis urgently in Malaysia, and also as a region. Yeah. Thank you so much. I think that's about it from me. Sorry that I took a bit long time, but if you have any questions, we can talk later. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that presentation, Nadia. That was very interesting. And I think everyone enjoyed that background on both the Climate Action Malaysia and generally youth activism around issues surrounding climate change. So that was very interesting. Thanks for that. And then I think I can introduce Mr. Wee now. So I've given some background on Mr. Calvin Wee, but I can invite him to do his sharing now.
Sure. Thank you, everybody. So my name is Calvin. I'm a Singaporean and very happy to share with you. As mentioned by Martin, I'm the co-founder of the Young Seekers. And feel free to follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. As an ASEAN youth myself, I graduated last year from NUS Business. And I spent time studying and working in both ASEAN and China. I've been to Thailand, Indonesia, stayed in Beijing and Shanghai. And so I'm very excited to share my stories with everybody. But when we talk about youth empowerment, I wanted to update everybody with some of the numbers and some of the statistics that we have. We have 230 million of us in ASEAN, and half of the population in ASEAN is under the age of 30. And if you look at us as a single entity, we actually represent the world's third largest market, after China and India. And we are also the world's third largest labor force with 630 million. That constitutes 9% of the world's population. So we are looking at a very large number here. And if we are looking at ASEAN as a single entity, we are the seventh largest economy in the world. And I think it's important to know what's happening in the region because, we are going to be the epicenter and the growth for the next few decades or even centuries to go. And for ASEAN youth, what should we do, right, to take a purchase of this thing? And especially, I think this year is very interesting. We did sign the RCEP, right? It's actually a trade agreement that was pushed by ASEAN. There's many achievements that we should celebrate and be proud of, and the future is bright for us, and we need to create the future that we want and the trust that we can continue to do better and achieve more. So why youths have important role to play, right? Some of us might think we're so young, we don't have experience. What can we really do? And how can we empower the young people in the region to best prepare themselves for these new challenges and new opportunities? I believe the first thing we must have is to have more trust and confidence, and most importantly, friendships, starting with young people, because the future will really depend on us to view and adapt to the changing world order, and we need to localize and humanize the ASEAN relationship. This means having more people-to-people collaborations across the different countries and on a regional level. And we also have to define the reality that we are in history, find a way forward where we can maintain prosperity and security in the region. This is important because as young people, if you imagine there's going to be a very bleak future, we are not going to be very hardworking. We won't be very optimistic of the future. And this is an effort that we really have to make on both sides, and especially among the younger ones among us. Next, I think we need to create and join programs that can build on strategic trust, focusing on areas of real potential collaboration. The reason why I started Young Seekers was when I studied in China in the past, it was quite shocking and revealing to me that I actually learned a lot more about ASEAN when I was studying in China than when I was in Singapore itself. I made so many friends from countries such as Laos, Cambodia, Philippines, Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, etc. And I never had the chance to really make friends with them when I was in Singapore. So it's important to build these friendships when we are young, step by step. I think for young people in ASEAN, think bigger, think beyond your own country. We are 10 very different and unique countries in one region, and we are all in different stages of development. So we can actually help each other out to do things together, do things that we can enjoy our common interests in ASEAN. And we also need more young people who have a nuanced understanding of politics, culture, and economics in ASEAN. And we have to rely on us to cut through many of these political soundbites and the modern day narratives on social media, which, to be honest, really focus a lot on the fear factor rather than the opportunity factor, and to put in place some kind of dialogues at all levels. People in each community, in each country, have to see the benefits of being in ASEAN. What does it benefit me and on a personal level? If not, it's very easy for humans to fall back to fear. And my fear for ASEAN youth is that we are not producing enough talents that will diminish effectiveness at the negotiating table, be it negotiating at the ASEAN level or be it negotiating beyond ASEAN and other countries and other regions. And this reminds me of, when ASEAN was first founded way back in 1967. It was a very difficult region. There were many conflicts, a lot of arguments, and it was during a time where Suharto was leading Indonesia. And for the Indonesians, you probably will know, he was very famous for this meeting called Empat Mata meetings, which stands for Four Eyes meeting. And this Four Eyes meeting is basically a very simple idea where two national leaders come together and they trash things out. And in order for you to even have this dialogue, this is built on the basis of friendship and understanding that both parties understand each other on a very deep level and is able to find consensus and find ways to collaborate together despite all the misgivings and tension. And this goes back to ASEAN, where we really believe in this concept of musyawara and mufakat, which stands for consultation and consensus. This is something that is very unique to ASEAN, which we also call the ASEAN way. I think this is something that's really important and we need to continue working on it, right? I believe that conflict and aggression will not lead you to a very good ending because you get people who are defensive and are not willing to collaborate together. So this is something we need to do more together to learn more about each other. And after all these years of dialogue, ASEAN has been here for decades. The young people in the region must really start to create our own narrative on the ASEAN relations. What type of ASEAN do you want to see in the future? And not just take guidance from external sources and discuss it. In summary, for me, I believe we must clarify new objectives. We also must foster new growth drivers that's inclusive, that youth from all the different ASEAN countries, be it from different stages of development, can do together. And together we can create new highlights for the future for ASEAN. So for young people, especially those about to graduate or those who have just graduated, how should we view the world differently after the pandemic? I think there is an oxymoron here. The first thing is that a lot of things are done virtually now, including this webinar that we are doing. But clearly, we feel the world shrinking. There's also real signs of deglobalization, right? You have xenophobia that's on the rise. You have very strong nationalism on the rise. Look at what's happening in Europe, what's happening in UK with Brexit, and the tensions that we see in America. No, we are not immune to all this. And this is something that really we need to be aware of. The world is now your virtual oyster. There are many new opportunities, yet new challenges. To be honest, it's quite hard to form genuine connections when you're not able to go to the office and meet each other face to face. You're not able to go to the classroom and meet each other face to face. And another big question we have is working from home here to stay. Is it something that's going to be a new normal? And the power of technology is important as an enabler, also disruptor, but it will also be a means to further cause social divide among those who have the resources and those who do not have the resources. And if that's the case, it might lead to more social tension within ASEAN, within each country as well. And we have to embrace globalization, embrace technology, while making sure everyone can benefit from the developments. So some of the considerations that we have to take into account, is first having a regional mindset. ASEAN, as I mentioned, is very diverse. We differ in terms of culture, language, religion, politics, one country from another. Having the type of cross-cultural competency is the key. I think as part of Young Seekers, what this is something we're really doing is to make sure that all the members are able to come in with an open mind, to make friends from different countries, to understand what's happening in the local context, and to find ways to do things together. Understanding how they think in different ways, understanding our culture and working styles is really going to be very important for the young people in ASEAN. And the second consideration is to think of entrepreneurship. And I think there are so many problems that we can solve in ASEAN, right? Solving some of the common issues that ASEAN faces, be it from environment degradation, as our other speaker mentioned, poverty elevation. We have some countries where a lot of us are still in poverty or near the poverty line. How can we help these people to get out of this vicious cycle? And then we can also think of access to education, which is really important as well. And I remember this because I have many friends from Indonesia work in Jakarta before, and it mentioned to me when especially for those who do not live in Java or do not live in Jakarta, it's a world apart from where they live in, and they are very aware of the differences in access to resources, to education, to hometown and in the capital city. So all these things are something that we need to be aware of. How can we as young people utilize all this creativity, all this energy to try to solve some of these social problems that we see in ASEAN? And lastly, I think education is important. When we have the chance again to travel, I hope that we can travel more around the region. I think a lot of young people like to go to US, to Europe, right, to Japan and Korea. But I'm really excited about what our region offers in itself, be it from a tourist perspective, a learning perspective, or business perspective, right? And it's important to not go with a tourist mentality. understand the economic plans for each country you're visiting, the up and coming industries, make local friends, which is very important, understand their aspiration, their fears, and try to link it back to your own country where you're from, what this country's development mean for you, for your country, and for other countries, and vice versa. It's really to have a more ASEAN kind of mindset rather than just being in separate countries. So end of the day, I think we really have to think for ourselves, what does ASEAN means to every one of us? How do we build an ASEAN identity that every single one of us feel proud of? I mean, let's just be honest here. I think we have a long way to go in terms of building identity. We do see ourselves as country first, ASEAN second. This is something that we spend a lot of work on to build a common identity. And ending off with a quote from Benjamin Franklin. He had a very interesting comment at the time of the signing of the Declaration of Independence in America. We must all hang together, or most assuredly, we shall all hang separately. And this is even more true today, with all the geopolitical tensions, where Southeast Asia is now at the heat of it, right? Every country trying to look to get us on their side. How can we remain impartial and independent without being influenced by all these external powers, while making sure that we can still benefit from economic growth and continued partnership with the rest of them? I think you've have a lot to think about, but I think it's a very positive future for all of us in ASEAN, and look forward to discussing more later during the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Calvin. It's very interesting on the importance of ASEAN as a political and economic entity and the role of young people in actualizing the potential of this region. I invite people to post some questions in the comment section. We already have a couple, but more is always better. So maybe I can kick this Q&A session off with a question that I think is for Nadia, because it's on the environments. So the question, Nadia, is what has been the greatest challenge in pushing for a better and healthier environment, and how were these challenges overcome? Yeah, I think you can see it. Yeah, there we go.
Yes, I can see this. So the question, this has been one of the most asked questions, because I think people are they've been in such a way sitting in darkness of and fear. I think people are looking forward to listen on solutions. I think that's the reason why most often than not people will always ask me what is the greatest challenge. I think everyone knows this, like the single biggest challenge or the problem that we actually see when it comes to a better and healthier environment are we ourselves, our individual self, and then also the system that we are seeing out there, and we are also participating in. And I think these challenges, there are tons of solutions out there, but we have to also be clear that these solutions are not silver bullets. You see, I think this is something, a lot of solutions that is coming from the technological side has always come in, and then claiming that we can do this, we can achieve this. But for example, when it comes to renewable energy, the power of solar, the power of wind, and etc., or a large hydro dam, for example, there are these are not silver bullets. We have to be aware of that. Whatever it is that we build always have a footprint. Whatever is being built in this country or in other countries, it might come from as the Southeast Asia region. To understand that line of thinking, how consumption works, is really important. I do believe that the pushing for better and healthier environment in this particular region really needs that that political will. This is something that is a very complex thing. We have the ASEAN way to solve things, and looking at, for example, the way how the collaboration works in terms of the acting on the transboundary heads itself. That is a massive collaboration. It needs a massive undertaking, coordination, understanding different laws in different countries, and etc. And to do that is a massive to undertake that is a massive process. But what's most important is do our governments have the kind of political urgency in addressing this? If we don't, we wouldn't see like specific actions being taken. I think it's really worth mentioning that I'm really glad to see that youth are taking up spaces, are taking up political spaces, and enriching the political influence as well. Because I do believe that issues such as climate, you know, the kind of tenacity, it always has to come from a young person, because it's the future that we're talking about, and that's our future. So work together, be collaborative, and understood where your political power lies, as an individual, and elect better people, for better governance, and also be participative of the process. Don't leave it to others to make decisions for you. We are, for ones who are educated, who has the privilege to educate or train other people, do that. I think it's really important for everyone to play a role. We cannot just rely on individuals or different corporations, or even the government alone to solve this. I think everyone has to have that kind of mindset that if we don't solve this together, we will not move forward. We will just regress and go into chaos. So I don't want to sound all doom and gloom, but the reality is there. The truth has to be spoken. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Nadia. And yes, I mean, organizing any sort of collective action is incredibly difficult. And I mean, I would love to ask some follow-up questions, but yeah, the questions are really coming in. So maybe I'll address this next one to Kelvin. So Kelvin, do you think the narrative of an ASEAN identity is able to unite a sense of belonging among the youth in Southeast Asia, and specifically a belonging to ASEAN? And do you think such an ASEAN identity is possible in light of the effort by each and every member state in the region to increase a feeling of nationalism in its own youth towards obviously the nation states?
Yeah, but I think thanks, Shukran, for the question. I think it's a great one. Let's go back to the reason why ASEAN was founded. The simple reason was ASEAN was founded to fight communism. That was the common enemy that ASEAN leaders were fighting back in the 1960s, 1970s. And it was a very real reason. That it wasn't because we love each other and all this, because we had a common enemy. And so this narrative of ASEAN identity has always been very hard to form, right? It's always been based on external reason. And you look at it now, we always compare ourselves to the European Union. And I felt it's not a fair comparison, because European Union, in a sense, they're very similar across culture and religion and all this. But I think for ASEAN, the narrative has to be, in a sense, we're in this together. And we want to do things that, for instance, in terms of education and curriculum, currently we don't have a common education curriculum. So everybody learn different things about ASEAN at different levels. I think in Singapore, we don't really touch that much on ASEAN. But my friends in Indonesia, in Thailand, it's part of school curriculum. So I could generally sense a stronger sense of identity and an understanding of what ASEAN really is vis-a-vis to other countries. And I don't think there's actually a conflict between having a sense of nationalism and having an ASEAN identity. But in a sense, it's always good to be proud of your own country, but also be aware that your country is part of another regional association that's doing amazing things. And I felt that it doesn't have to be in competition. Like for instance, every country has done many amazing things under the ASEAN platform, and what we want to do more is to make friendships between all these ASEAN countries. Because the fear is that along the way, as we become more proud of our own country, we don't want this to turn into xenophobia. We want to develop together as a regional association, and it's important. That's why, as I mentioned again and again, to understand what's happening in other countries by making friends, you need to have the kind of understanding in order to be really aware of what's happening in the region. Yeah, I think that's the answer for Sukron as well. It's not easy for sure, because the idea of ASEAN has always been at a very elite level. At the ministers, the politicians, the business leaders who really see the benefit. But on a grassroots level, among the young people, we don't really see it. And I think for many friends, I have many friends in Myanmar especially, you see a very big regression in their sense of being in ASEAN. They don't like it now because they see how ASEAN is not moving in the right direction for helping them in the current situation. But as we mentioned, the ASEAN way, it's not always uh, what you see normally. It's a different way of doing things. So I think that's why we need to have the kind of understanding of history and how that type of methodology has been quite successful so far in managing this region that is really, really very different in many areas. Yeah, thank you.
Great, thanks very much. I mean, yeah, many questions are coming in, and I think I'll also ask the next one to Calvin, just because I think the topic of this was really touched upon more in Nadia's presentation already, but I promised Nadia to turn to you for the next question. So, Calvin, how do you think COVID has impacted mobility and youth activism in Southeast Asia? And do you think the pandemic has affected the youth in underprivileged communities the most?
Yep, I think thanks Maria for the question. Definitely in a positive way, I think it's actually benefited youth activism because everything's done online now, right? Like everything like for instance activism you see in Philippines and Thailand, you see many other countries joining in because it's all done virtually. Webinars, and all those dialogues are done virtually, and because of this sense of getting tighter together in a virtual format, a lot of us know what's really happening in the other region. And if you're in normal times, you probably wouldn't be so affected because life just goes on for you. But we have everybody who's stuck at home. The only outsource for you to spend your time is online. So I think that has been positive. Youth activists has been able to reach each other a lot easier virtually and to do cross-country type of collaboration with each other. In mobility wise, you definitely can't do anything much because everybody's in lockdown, right? Even for like Singapore, we are still in a lockdown. We were in a 1 month lockdown for now. But I would say the trend moving forward, with more young people in ASEAN who are more tech savvy, I see digital platforms becoming a more and more important avenue for people to come together, to brainstorm, and to even solve problems together, to inspire other people with problems that might not be similar, but could be done in a different way as well. The second question is on underprivileged communities. Definitely, I have examples for this. My Cambodia chapter leader was just telling me, when they just went into lockdown and everything was done virtually for universities, there were some classmates who don't live in Phnom Penh, right, the capital city of Cambodia. Those who live in the rural areas were not able to access internet or have very unstable internet connection. They were really affected because of these online classes, and it's really very important to help these underprivileged communities. And there's two areas to help them. My worry for people from underprivileged opportunities is not so much that they have no access to opportunities. My worry is that they are not aware that there are even opportunities in the first place. And that's the scary part, right? Imagine you live in a kampong, in a village, and your view of the world is just within that small village, or within that small city. You're not aware of what can be possible for you if you're looking at the region outside of you. That's the real unequal opportunity that I think we need to solve in a way to help all these young people see beyond what they think they know about the world and to give them that kind of opportunity so that they have a chance, right? Especially to move up the social ladder, to become, to have a better lifestyle, livinghood, compared to their parents or people in the community now.
I think Nadia, maybe you also want to touch upon this question a bit.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Kelvin. I totally agree. I totally echo your points on getting the collaboration. Was such an easy breeze that we don't have to fly. We don't have to attend all this, you know, um, seminars or workshops that is totally can be done on on Zoom or something. And especially during the pandemic, right? What I noticed is that in my line of work, when we did the Misi Bantu Orang Asli, which is the indigenous aid activity initiative that we done, it was we we had discussions not only among Malaysians but also different activists from different countries on how to mobilize aid to rural areas. And at one point, an activist from the Philippines was teaching me how to send aid that is how do I say this? How to put gender intervention in the way how you send aid, for example. And it was incredible that we would have learned this if we don't get any of this connection with people outside, and the that was amazing. But then we also understood the kind of digital divide that we see happening amongst rural children and women, and specific on okay, say children, they don't go to schools anymore, primarily because okay, schools are closed, and they don't participate in school modules and things like that because they don't have the kind of tools. They don't have, some of them don't even have phones, and some of the phones are not does not have the kind of specs to browse online or download certain big assignments or typing and such. It's not even possible. So we are seeing in Malaysia, and I'm assuming a lot of different countries around the world, when it comes to rural education for young children, it will be impacted for the next 5-10 years, and the next generation will be the kind of generation who don't go to school. What kind of future are we seeing then? So it's a very problematic thing, not only in terms of activism, but education in that sense. When it comes to activism, doing classes online with indigenous communities, for example, has been quite a hassle. But we still need to go through that. We need to find ways on how to get them in an area where there's internet, and provide them with the kind of tools enabling them to do all this kind of stuff. Because otherwise, action wouldn't happen. We would be just in our bubble speaking in Zoom with each other, but the vulnerable people are left out from the conversation. So there needs to be that kind of bridge to talk to them and bring this kind of action. It's hard, but it's not it's not as effective as physical sort of interaction, but it needs to be done. Yeah.
Thanks. Great. Thank you very much, Nadia. I just want to make sure that you can both hear me okay, just because my I think, yeah, okay, great, because my camera went a bit funny there. Okay, well, I think we don't have too much time remaining in the Q&A, but maybe we can squeeze in this one more question. So I'll start with Nadia, but it's really addressed to both. So how can we help empower the youth in ASEAN and provide the same opportunity for all youth across ASEAN member states? This is for the both of you, but let's kick it off with Nadia. I can't hear you, Nadia. I don't know if it's just me, but you might be muted.
Yeah. Yes, I am. I've done that thousands of times. Okay. Thank you so much, Diaz, for that question. Yes, I do believe there's a lot that we can do to empower people from different regions, providing the same opportunity. Though that is something that is quite hard to grasp, particularly because of the challenges, the social geographic challenges, and then the different capacity of different youth, different communities. We cannot, treat all youth as a homogeneous sort of entity. It's very different. I think, like I said, we empower by grounding, information, classes. I think this is the kind of action that can be taken by people or youth that is living in urban areas, how they can sort of impart knowledge to, for example, people that is less privileged. I think doing all those classes, doing all those workshops, and just to give you an example, I think the kind of collaborations that we've been seeing from youth from different countries around Asia. this kind of perspective has to come when everyone was given the same platform to speak. It starts from giving a platform where everyone can speak at the same level, because otherwise, we all come in with like, for example, I come into a climate, say, negotiation, knowing a lot of things about climate, etc. But there's a group of indigenous youth that came to the table. They don't have much information. So how, that kind of, there's already the power imbalance, that dynamics is not clear over there, that will affect the way how we talk, how we speak, how we negotiate things. So the first thing is to come in together on the same level, and providing spaces for vulnerable people to participate. I think there's a lot of things that we can do, but this first step, to treat them with respect, and do not alienate them. I think don't alienate people. That is the worst thing that you can do. So yeah, that's from my side.
Great. And maybe I'll just let Calvin jump in quickly.
Sure.
And then we'll have to stop the Q&A after this.
Okay, so I think for DRs, for me, it's not about providing the same opportunity. It's providing the same level of resources. And I really felt very strongly for this because when I took part in the Young ASEAN Leaders Policy Initiative last year at Chulalongkorn University, um, I realized, my friends from Thailand, from Philippines, from Brunei, have very different concerns for their own country, problems they want to address. It could be as simple as infrastructure, public infrastructure in maybe in Thailand. How can we help, the farmers in Thailand or Philippines and all this? And these are problems that as a Singaporean I don't face. I don't have such problems. And that's why I think it's important to have that kind of mindset to really first understand what kind of environment they're in, what do they want to get out of it, and what can we do to provide the resources that they need so that they can be successful. Because I always believe that the local people understand what they need a lot better than us. So it shouldn't be a top-down kind of thing. It's more about how can we give them what they need to be successful. So I think this is the same across all the ASEAN youth. I think we all have very, very different, priorities and initiatives that we're going to champion. It's about giving them a platform that they can, fight for their initiatives, give them the resources, and also giving them that kind of platform to make friends and to do things together. I think for young people, we are very energetic, but sometimes we are not very um, cognizant on the need to be sustainable. How can we do things on a sustainable manner and not just burn out in a number of months or years? And that this required a very strong community to last for the long run. I think that will be my answer to how can we empower each other and provide the opportunities. Thank you.
Fantastic. I think actually we will have time just to squeeze in this one more question, which will be good for the both of you. So, Nadia, do you think that policy making today is excessively top-down in Southeast Asia, and how are governments in the region able to include youth participation as a primary source of policy formulation?
Sorry, come again.
Okay, yeah, I can.
Oh
I can
yeah, now
repeat
it's
that.
coming. Sorry.
Yeah, it's appeared on the screen.
Right. Okay. So the question is, sorry, I have to read because I didn't hear just now. There was a slight technical glitch. All right. In the sense of a global social movement, youth participation can be impactful due to double exposure. Okay. And the next, consider that recent policies development take more on top-down approach, which does not. Right. Okay. Yeah. So yes, of course. Yeah. I there needs to be both, top down and bottom up, definitely. And I work from I work in both areas. I mean, I do policy research, top down, and then I work with the grassroots community as well. So they need to meet halfway. Seriously, like it cannot be just top bottom or just bottom up. We have to realize that. And I think when you do that kind of top down, just top down, you will start seeing that your policy failures certain communities are not being addressed here. And the same goes with policies, for example, a climate policy, during the stakeholder participation. How do we, implement that kind of processes that ensures inclusivity? So this is where you have to work with grassroots communities, with NGOs, CSOs on the ground who understand the people better, and then you bring them up in the same kind of table and negotiate and talk and discuss together. Because just top down policy making is no longer is not relevant. It's just a bad kind of governance. And it's not just youth participation here. We are talking about other different sort of communities that are also vulnerable, like people, indigenous, migrants. How do they count into forming policies of countries? I think this is a common sort of conversation and discourse that we have in terms of policy making, how to bring different voices in, and how to weight in different voices. It's quite a complex process, but I do believe that Malaysia, for example, is already a signatory to the is a signatory to the Paris Agreement. And and to maintain that kind of inclusivity is actually one a large, huge chunk of the Paris Agreement, to maintain that everyone has the same sort of right to speak, to participate. And the government needs to ensure that. And for that, I think that is where youth participation should come in, and not only by building policies, but how to monitor them, how to implement them, to monitor, to evaluate. This is critical. It's just not making policies, forming up targets, but about the other things. So it's it's really critical to enter it in that way. Thank you.
Great, and I'm sure, Calvin, you probably have some thoughts on this too.
Yes.
Which we'd love to hear.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think it's back to this idea of mindset, right? Because top-down approach has been the common approach across all countries. It's not something unique to Southeast Asia. These are how things are done. The most important thing is not to make the person above you your enemy, and not to make that person feel you're his enemy or her enemy, right? You want to come to the table with kind of collaborative kind of mindset. No, I think eventually the reason why some things are done, some of the adults, right, they do things certain ways is because, one, they have more experience than you, and secondly, they probably see things from a different angle. And your job as a young people is to be persuasive and to make them see things from your angle. I don't think there's any right or wrong here, just different perspective. And that's why we need to understand each other's perspectives more and to find a common ground, right? I think that's why youth participation has been a source of policy formulation. I think on the ASEAN level, we've been approached to give comments, to join meetings, work meetings, for youth type of policy initiative. It has been done. Just that sometimes we think it's not sufficient, right? Especially for us who are going to be the ones that are going to be in the future running the economy or the society and country. We want our thoughts to be heard more, and in a sense, we are fortunate to be in a living at a time where technology is very, very advanced. We can connect very easily compared to the past. I'm very sure young people in the past, our parents, were also very vocal and passionate about some initiatives, but they didn't have the tools and the resources to do so. Now that we are empowered with all these tools, it's about how can we get more people, rally more people to be aware of this initiative, to be aware of this cause, but yet in a sense, not trying to break the system to get things done, right? The system is there for the reason. We learn how to work within the system and improve it, right? So I think that's the mindset we need to have as a young person, right? To foster the kind of very positive type of relationship rather than making people who are opposing your ideas your enemies, right? I think if you're all for the common purpose of advancing for the better good of the country, the better good of the region, there are going to be common grounds that we can come together and get things done. Yeah, I think it's back to the ASEAN way of consultation and consensus. It's not happening on just ASEAN, but also within the country, and we see that across many countries all the time as well.
Fantastic. Well, I think that was a fantastic Q&A session. And to move on, I think I'd like to introduce Fadila, who will talk about our program at AYIEP.
Right. Thanks for the time, Martin. I think our Bincang ASEAN has covered a lot of issues related to youth, ASEAN mobility, and also youth activisms. And so here, Universitas Gadjah Mada is currently accepting its application for AYIEP, ASEAN Youth Initiative Empowerment Program. It is a short course program consisting of a series of activities, including international seminars, public lectures, online institutional visit, and also group discussions. And the short course will be conducted from August 7th to September 4th, around 4 weeks. We are extending our application date, which was initially ended at July 11th, and now it's extended till July 31st. Next slide, please. So we have 3 different packages for you to choose. Feel free to choose based on your preferences, but please do mind that the deadline of the registrations of each package is different. So please choose based on your preferences. Right. So one question remains: what's the benefit besides of the experiences that you will get? Of course, this summer course offered you transferable credit. Just go on the benefit, and that can be transferred to your school, especially for you, the ASEAN enthusiasts. We also offer so many great speakers that will be joining in our sessions. Can you go on the next slide, please? Right. So click on the link. Please register. If you have still have any doubts, do reach out to us about the program. Thank you for the time.
Fadila, for that. So maybe I can take the opportunity now to wrap up our session. So we had 2 fantastic presentations from our speakers, Nadia and Calvin. Nadia was talking about the urgency of addressing climate change in the region and the importance of youth activism in addressing this issue. Nadia also talked about the role of Klima Action Malaysia and the fantastic work that they do towards that. And then Calvin on his side talks about the work with young seekers and, generally speaking, the importance of actualizing the ASEAN region as its own political and economic entity. So that was fantastic from both speakers. We obviously had a great Q&A session where we talked about the ASEAN identity and the challenges posed towards youth activism, and in particular activism on climate change issues, but also how we can get youth empowerment in general to be and youth participation to be an important aspect of policymaking in the region. So now I'd like to encourage all the people who attended today's session to fill in the feedback form. I think a QR code will be displayed on the screen. Yes, there we go. So if you just scan this, you can provide some feedback on today's session, which obviously we'd love to hear. And I think from us, that's all for today. Great. Thank you very much, Nadia and Calvin. And thanks for everyone who attended today.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone. Stay safe.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right.
Oops.